Hello friends, welcome to Daily News Analysis on The Hindu by Daily Shots. In this video, we are going to deal with topics from editorial, international and business pages on UPSC and TNPSC perspective, and other relevant articles are explained and shared in the below description box in the format of a PDF, and the relevant timestamping had been provided to navigate to the relevant news article directly. So now let's go into the session. Funds and the PM. In this article, the author explains the difference between the PM CARES Fund and PM's National Relief Fund. So who can contribute to this fund? The contribution can be made from individuals and organizations. And donations are tax exempted and it is counted against the company's CSR obligations. And there are as well exemption from Foreign Contribution Regulations Act of 2010, which accepts a foreign contribution. So the structural part of this fund is that the Prime Minister chairs the fund and nominates three eminent members who are relevant in the fields as a board of trustees. The Minister of Defence, Home Affairs and Finance are ex officio trustees of the fund. So the question is that does India already have a fund with similar objectives? So the answer is yes. Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, which was set up in 1948, was originally accepted as the public contributions for the assistance of partition refugees. So they are being used for the families of those who had been killed in natural calamities and the victims of major accidents and riots, and support medical expenses for acid attack victims and others. So they are managed by Prime Minister and his deputy, the Finance Minister, the Congress President, and the representative of Tata trustees and an industry representative. So in 1985, the committee entrusted the entire management of fund to the PM of India. So it has a sole discretionary power on him for the fund, and the joint secretary in the PMO administers the fund. So the balance as of now till December 2019 of the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund has unspent a balance of 3,800 crores. The question arises why there is a new fund when there is already the PM NRF fund which is actually available. As the PM NRF fund has a similar objectives and the states as well has the similar chief ministers relief funds. So in 45 days, the donation added up to at least 6,500 crores. And the major concern is that no proper response for ITI filings on respect of PMNRF and PM CARES operations, and it is opaque for public scrutiny. So it is against the guidelines for the CSR expenditure, where the corporate's donation to the fund, which is accounted as the CSR expenditure, are not to be used for the funding purposes on government scheme, as this will be a double benefit of tax exemption, and this will become a regressive incentive. So the need of the hour is that the information on amount collected through PM CARES and the PM NDRF to be made public, and the guidelines are to be followed on CSR activities by corporates. How can interstate workers be protected? In this article, the author explains the difference between how the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act of 1979 is different from the currently proposed bill on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code of 2019, which is planning to consolidate and reform labor laws by repealing the 13 labor laws currently in prevailing conditions into a single piece of legislation. So, 1979 law is to regulate the employment and working conditions of interstate migrants is now to be relooked, is what the current content is insisting upon. So, the lack of serious implementation and subsequently the rights are being ignored by the government. So now the new bill which is being introduced, naming Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code of 2019. It's consolidating and reforming labor laws by merging 13 labor laws into a single piece of legislation. And also the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act of 1979 is one of them. So what does the 1979 law says about? It regulates the employment of interstate migrants and their conditions of service. So for who are all these laws are applicable? The establishments that employ 5 or more migrant workmen from other states, or if it had employed 5 or more other workmen on any day in the preceding 12 months to interstate workmen. And also the system of registration of establishments uh, are taken care by this 1979 law, and it prohibits employing interstate workmen without a certificate of registration from relevant authority, and the license are mandatory for contractors who recruit workmen from one state for deployment in another state. So what are the beneficial provisions for interstate migrants in that law? So it has a system of accountability, and it's a first layer of formalizing the utilization of their labor. So it has a track of employed person and the legal basis for regulating their condition of service, basically, which means to say that they have legal backing. And also it provides terms and conditions of agreement, and it also consists of remuneration which is to be paid to the workers, hours of working hours, the fixation of wages and other essential amenities in respect of interstate migrate workmen. And also low wages are not possible than what is prescribed under the minimum wages act. So the next question is that what does the proposed code say on migrant workers? The proposed law seeks to cancel the 13 acts such as Factories Act, Mines Act, Dock Workers Act, Interstate Migrant Workmen's Act, and other enactments relating to those working in plantations, construction, cinema, BD and cigarette manufacture, motor transport, and media. So the act basically includes the interstate migrant workers as contract laborers. Even though there is a separate chapter available on contract labor and interstate migrant workers, the parliamentary committee says that the provision relating to migrant workers being covered in separate chapters so that can be covered in separate chapters so that the safety, health, working conditions of the migrant workers can be clearly taken out for implementation, besides making special provisions for them as has been done by the state government of Kerala. The code contains provisions similar to the 1979 Act regarding the registration of establishments, license of contractors, and inclusion of terms and conditions of work hours, wages, and amenities. And if we see the old act and compare with the proposed code, it envisages the payment of a displacement allowance and a journey allowance to interstate migrant workers. So naturally, there arises a question: is there a loss of benefits for interstate workers if the code comes into force? But basically, what the trade unions feels that it always to be better to have a separate enactment. Center of Indian Trade Unions (CITU) has highlighted the fact that both the states where they work and home states have obligations cast upon them in existing laws. Since they are from a different state and work in another different state, there are some obligation casting upon them in the current existing law. So, despite the fact that it had been poorly implemented, labor unions have the suggestion and feel that preserving the separate enactment and enforcing it will be a better option than subsuming or taking that into under the larger code. Now, a mobile app predicts COVID-19 incidents and days in advance. This article speaks about a newly developed app, namely Coronavirus Pandemic Epidemiology, named as COPE, which is developed as a COVID-19 symptom tracking mobile application used for epidemiologic data collection and analysis. So previously it was a personal nutrition study app which had been renewed and repurposed as an existing mobile application for tracking the COVID-19 patients. So it enables people to self-report data related to novel coronavirus exposure, symptoms, and infections. So basically, what they say is the common symptoms are to be fatigue and cough, followed by diarrhea, fever, and loss of smell. So when we see the uses of this app, the app can predict dynamics of this COVID-19 incidence a few days in advance of traditional measures, such as positive tests, hospitalizations, or mortality. So this special potential highlight of this app makes a real-time symptom tracking to help guide allocation of resources for testing and treatment, as well as recommendations for lockdown or easement in specific areas. People who had cough and or fatigue and at least one additional symptom like including diarrhea and loss of smell were more likely to test positive. But basically, the need for priority and the strategy to be used for testing the patients is to be that the individuals with complex or multiple three or more symptomatic presentation perhaps maybe should be prioritized for testing. So this should be the priority on testing. Using National Family Health Survey for population surveillance for coronavirus. So basically, the current strategy used by the government is not giving any accurate number of the affected patients. So it is also impossible to understand the true prevalence in a population. So what the suggestion is that scientific and logistical infrastructure of India's National Family Health Survey can be used as a leveraging point to conduct a random sample based population surveillance to track the virus. To take an example, India was projected to have 25 million HIV positive individuals with a 3 to 4% prevalence in adults. But after random sampling is done, based on the population surveillance, estimates sharply reduced to 2.5 million with a 0.28 prevalence in adults. So the COVID focused data collection efforts onto the NFHS infrastructure would keep operational costs low, with the major expense being laboratory cost for testing samples. So the meaning is that if a disease is widespread, meaning that there is a higher prevalence and its detection is easier, and also it needs only a smaller sample. But if conversely, if it is rare, there needs to be higher sample collection and it is harder to find for the testing. And so this can be made as a point to get implemented at the state and district levels. So currently the government of India is considering a random sample based zero prevalence, which means the amount of pathogen which is present in the blood level, and this survey is being undertaken. So but the recommendation is that the latest NFHS district sampling frame to be used and not any new invention to be made. Thank you friends for watching. That's all from today's daily news analysis. The relevant fact check points had been added in the last page of the PDF. So give me a thumbs up if you like the video and subscribe to my channel.